Today is Monday, November 24th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. China's crackdown on Christians continues to ramp up. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us your thoughts as well. Quick Start Podcast at cbn.org. We're glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day. And as always, there is a lot to get to. And on the focus story today, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at China's latest crackdown on Christians. We're going to talk to Bob Fu, who's on the ground and connected with people on the ground there in China, and will give us an update there. Also, on the main thing, pro-life pregnancy clinics have been under fire in recent years, particularly under the Biden administration. How are they faring now? Madison Seals has an update on today's main thing. All right, don't forget to subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. You can find the link right there in the description below. We put it in there each and every episode for you, for your convenience. We hope you're checking those out. We'd appreciate it. All right, with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the latest closed-door meetings in Geneva were the most productive yet, as the Trump administration keeps pushing its 28-point plan to end the Russia-Ukraine war. The proposal has faced bipartisan criticism, especially concerns that it pressures Ukraine to give up territory and limit its military, but U.S. officials now say revisions were made with Ukrainian and European input. Zelensky and his team struck a notably positive tone, calling the discussions very productive and saying their core security concerns were addressed. This all came just hours after Trump blasted Ukraine's leadership for showing zero gratitude, though Rubio says the president is pleased with the progress. Europe is circulating its own counterproposal, rejecting any recognition of Russian-held territory and warning that Ukraine must not be left defenseless. Trump has given Kyiv until Thursday to respond, but both sides now admit the timeline is flexible. China has tightened its grip on Christianity with a sweeping crackdown that's alarming. Human rights advocates worldwide, they formally arrested 18 pastors and ministry workers from the well-known Zion Church, detaining them since early October and now bringing official charges. And that's going to be our focus story here as CBN's Gary Lane talked to Bob Fu from China Aid to talk about this push to silence unregistered churches. Very concerning stuff. And that conversation is today's focus story.
Bob, first, just give us a brief summary for our viewers who are unfamiliar with what happened to the leaders of the Zion Church last month and why.
Thank you, Gary. Zion Church has been one of the largest urban house church network in 40 cities with over 100 churches with 5,000 members and reached to over 100,000 Christians every day. And because of this rapid growth, the Chinese Communist Party, since October 9th, launched the most serious campaign against that church. Within 24 hours, over 30 of their senior leaders were rounded up in 9 provinces, and including the founder of the church, Pastor Ezra Jin, and the pastor Wang Lim, as you just mentioned, who actually got a PhD from one of American universities and returned to China with 2 American-born American citizen children. And the human casualty, the price for religious freedom has been even intensified in recent days after those pastors were under criminal detention. As you mentioned, Pastor Wang Lin's wife and their 2 American citizen children were denied not only the education, but the freedom of movement and the freedom to travel to overseas. They were also under the travel ban by the Chinese Communist Party. Basically, they were denied everything. The children cannot be allowed to even go to school. and they are not even allowed to rent or even own the home. Whenever they did that, the public security officer would go and pressure the landlord and the owner of the home that they are about to even purchase. They were denied.
Bob, these are American citizens, these children. Why aren't we hearing more from the U.S. State Department or Donald Trump?
I think we need to hear more. We need our elected government officials, especially President Donald Trump, with a platform of American First. And these are two American citizens holding American passports. They are basically denied from even leaving China.
And Bob, doesn't the Constitution, the Chinese Constitution and law, guarantee education?
You're right, Gary. I mean, the Chinese government even had their own law and regulations claiming this children's education and even were compulsory and legitimately allowed. And yet the Zion Church children, and some even lost their homes because their parents or one of the parents were under criminal detention, and their bank accounts were frozen. So this is really the most serious religious persecution against the Chinese urban house church movement we have not seen since the Cultural Revolution nearly 50 years ago.
It wasn't that long ago that the Early Rain Covenant Church experienced similar treatment. So what can you tell us about Pastor Wang Yi?
Yes, Pastor Wang Yi was the founder of the Early Rain Covenant Church based in Chengdu City, and he was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment in 2020 after he preached a sermon based on John 3:16, publicly calling President Xi to repent for his repressive religious policy against God and ask him to accept Christ for salvation. And for that, he was accused of instigating the subversion of state power and received 9 years. And yet, Pastor Wang Yi still holds his faith very steadily and firmly and joyfully. And I was told in a recent visit, he was telling his family member that he has over 1,000 items of prayer requests, prayer items in his prison. He's praying for America, praying for the free world. And some of his church leaders under Early Rain Covenant Church has been under constant harassment and even administrative detention for simply holding their Sunday worship at their own homes. So Xi Jinping launched really the most severe persecution against house churches, and even the government-sanctioned churches had been under attack. Some members were even sentenced to 14 years imprisonment for simply refusing to take down the cross from the rooftop of their church building. So that tells how severely the persecution has been. And yet God has been good and faithful. I mean, the revival and church growth continue despite the persecution. And even in the middle of the persecution, we have seen Zion Church, Early Rain Covenant Church, they have never stopped worshiping God and in their church, in their homes, even since their church were formally banned and declared as illegal.
Okay, more persecution, more church growth. Bob Fu, president of China Aid. Thank you, Bob, for being with us to provide additional insights.
Thank you, Gary, for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate that update there. Very troubling stuff. And as always, we have to continue to pray for the persecuted church there in China. They are ground zero for a lot of the persecution around the globe as the communist government continues to crack down on Christians there. So definitely be adding them to your prayer list. And we're going to go to the main thing now. And the Charlotte Lozier Institute recently released its 2025 National Pregnancy Center report. Karen Zarnecki, executive director of CLI, talked to Madison Seals about the report and what it says about the importance and status of pro-life pregnancy clinics. That's today's main thing.
Karen, can you talk about the scope of this 2025 National Pregnancy Center report and some of its most significant findings?
Absolutely. Well, this is the fourth installment of the Charlotte Lozier Institute's Legacy of Life and Love series. So we've been doing this for the last 8 years. And for this particular survey, we surveyed 2,775 pregnancy centers in all 50 states. We had some wonderful partners that we work with, CareNet, Heartbeat International, the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, and Focus on the Family's Option Ultrasound Program, in addition to state coalition leaders across the country to make sure that we are trying to capture as many data points as possible. And for this particular survey, the key findings are that pregnancy centers saw over 1 million new clients, which is the equivalent of each center serving a new client every single day in 2024. And if you take a look at the total value of medical care, support, education services, material goods, the values for 2024 would be $452 million, helping those local communities. Another great data point is 8 in 10 centers provide free or low-cost medical services staffed by 10,000 medical professionals. And just the tangible material support like diapers, cribs, strollers has really skyrocketed to over $116 million in value, which is a 48% increase from the 2022 report. It really shows that pregnancy centers are meeting the real needs of families. And 2 more data points that I will share with you. Client satisfaction is at an all-time high at 98%, which effectively says this is high quality, excellent, compassionate community care. And one of the surprising things to me was that in 2024, 29% of those pregnancy centers provided abortion pill reversal as a service, and 77% of them provided post-abortion support. So it really is holistic, 360-degree care for whatever women, families, and children are in need.
And you mentioned that you've been doing this report for the past 8 years. So what have you noticed about the number of pregnancy centers around the country? Has there been an increase in that to serve the increase in need, or what does that look like?
Well, if you're talking about the trends, what we're seeing is in all categories across the board, pregnancy centers are fundraising more, and they're actually providing more services. If you want to compare them with Planned Parenthood, they give you an abortion, virtually nothing else. No pap smears, no STD testing. Pregnancy centers are really stepping up to the needs and helping people. They are also viewed as a complement to the community health centers that are around the country. So they're really providing phenomenal services in their local communities.
And one thing that this report highlights that I'd like to mention is that most of these centers are providing free or low-cost medical services, because that's something that people often attribute to abortion facilities, is that they're necessary because they provide free, quote-unquote, health care for women in need. So how are these pregnancy centers meeting that need?
A lot of times what they're doing with their local boards are figuring out what the needs are in their particular communities. And if you take a look at the range of services, for example, 85% of those 2,775 centers are providing prenatal and parenting education. That is a huge difference from 8 years ago. 77% I've already mentioned are doing after or post-abortion support. And another really great data point is 31% of those centers are trained in outreach to individuals who've been victimized by trafficking. I mean, that again, they saw the need, they're meeting the needs, and more centers are doing a lot of these types of things. I mean, 81% of the centers provide ultrasound services. If a woman or a family can see a picture of what their developing baby looks like in the womb, the chances of them thinking twice about abortion are significant. So just, again, the range of services, from STD testing to STD treatments, to lactation and breastfeeding consultations, childbirth classes. It's really a whole range of services. Again, a holistic way to treat mom, baby, and families.
That's amazing. And it's so important and so necessary. As you're mentioning all these different things that pregnancy centers are providing now, it just makes me think how much the landscape of abortion in America, especially following the Dobbs decision, has changed over the last few years. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what do you see as the focus of the pro-life movement, yes, but I think more specifically as it relates to pregnancy centers going into 2026?
Well, as you know, in a post-Dobbs America, we have at least 1.1 million abortions a year. So the need for pregnancy centers is greater, not less. And from prior research that we've done at CLI, 60% of women who've had abortions would rather have given birth if they had more emotional support or financial security. So as pregnancy centers are increasing the level and types of services to meet the individual needs, I think they're just going to be becoming even more important from here on out. You know, one interesting thing that I'm always asked is that, do pregnancy centers accept any government funding? And the answer is yes, but they do within the confines, some of them do, I should say. 18% of pregnancy centers or pregnancy help organizations, it's a broader term than pregnancy centers, do accept some form of government support. And it really shows that they play a critical role in life-affirming alternatives to abortion. And when I use the term pregnancy help organization, it includes not just the pregnancy centers, but maternity homes and adoption agencies. Since the last report 2 years ago, we've seen a lot of states continuing their existing funding of support in these areas, but also new state funding programs in 4 additional states. So I think states are seeing that they really are one alternative for providing community care. They have phenomenal client satisfaction. They're really meeting individuals' needs. They're doing it with a lot of times faith-based, compassionate care, and you're not going to get that typically from a government-run clinic, or I hate to say it, even a doctor's office where you're seen as a patient with a 15 to 30-minute window with not a lot of follow-up unless you initiate that and pay for those services. So the needs are great of individuals, and the pregnancy centers are really stepping up and meeting those needs. And as you know, the report's title is, with unwavering care, I think they're proving that day in and day out.
There was a period of time when we were seeing a rise in attacks on pregnancy centers. And I don't know if that's something that you guys looked at in this study, but has there been any recent coverage or reports about any of those happening, or has that kind of died down a little bit?
Oh, that's actually increasing. On December 2nd, there's going to be a major case in the Supreme Court versus First Choice Women's Resource Centers versus Platkin. And this case is really about donor disclosure and whether pregnancy centers have to be harassed into giving folks their donors' names and information on what they've donated. This would not only harass the pregnancy centers, but it would harass the donors. So that's being fought. But if you take a look at what the New Jersey Attorney General did, he put out a consumer alert to smear and discredit the pregnancy centers with really unsubstantiated accusations. As a matter of fact, there's no one that's actually complained about them. So these are all trumped up charges. And public records show that Planned Parenthood was heavily involved in the drafting, editing, and review of that consumer alert. So pregnancy centers really have to be careful in how they operate, because they will have attorneys general trying to shut them down. It's really a sad state of affairs what's happening. So I think we're going to see a lot more attacks, a lot more attempts to spread misinformation and discredit pregnancy centers, because they're stealing clients from the abortion industry. So if they're costing the abortion industry clients and money, they're all that much more of a threat to them. So unfortunately, this is not going to die down anytime soon.
How would you encourage people to support their local pregnancy centers?
Well, for anyone who is a Christian and will want to support these centers, you can do a few things. Number one is pray for women facing this very difficult decision in their life. I'd also, if they have the opportunity, thank the courageous personnel who are working in the PRCs or the forefront of life-saving care, but more importantly, on the receiving end of a lot of ugly comments and a lot of harassment. And I would also say pray for the centers that are receiving some of these attacks, and pray for, the last thing I would pray, there's a lot of things we could pray for, is to pray that there's a very good outcome in that Platkin case in the Supreme Court.
All right, Madison, appreciate that conversation there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing. And we're going to look at Philippians 4:12 and 13. This is a verse often taken out of context. You'll know why in just a minute. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. And in any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And a lot of people take that verse to mean that they can just do anything they want. But really what's going on here in this verse is Paul's talking about having joy in every circumstance. That's why it's preceded by abundance and need. And so what he's saying is, not I can get all the things I want and I can just do whatever I want. It's I can have joy in the midst of plenty and the midst of want. And so that's where we're going to leave it for today's podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Also, join up with our FaithWire Substack. We're praying through the news of the day here as we see things like what's happening in China with our Christians there. And we want to pray along together as the body of Christ. Well, God bless. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.